We're announcing today that combat training has begun for a company-sized group from the new Syrian forces. This program is critical and a complex part of our counter-ISIL efforts. We expect a second group to begin training in the next few weeks.
The executioner, Bashar al-Assad, continues to kill his own people almost with glee. New chemical attacks have been detected in the Syrian northwest. Barrel bombs filled with shrapnel and anything else able to cut into human flesh rain down on innocents, women, and children. And America is now training Syrian fighters to go up against ISIS. Now, we call it training, but is it so little and so late that we are again fooling ourselves about being able to change generations of hate? Our guest is senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where he focuses on counterterrorism in Africa and the Middle East. Also senior editor at the Long War Journal. Let's welcome Thomas Joscelyn to the Hardline. Thomas, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thomas, when we look at what has been announced, is this nothing more than just an ill-timed and maybe even late Band-Aid?
Well, it's not clear how this is going to work. If you heard that announcement, it was focused primarily on Islamic State or ISIS or ISIL as it's called. There was no mention of al-Qaeda's role in the rebellion against Assad, where al-Qaeda is actually deeply ingrained. Of course, ISIS is an offshoot of al-Qaeda. And as you pointed out, the Assad regime is, of course, a killing machine as well, and is brutalizing the Syrian people. So there's really no strategy in place here for sort of combating this sort of very complex dynamic inside Syria. What I'm concerned about is that the announcement of this training seems to be focused primarily and solely on countering the Islamic State and doesn't take into account the whole picture.
Well, let's look at that picture here. But then we have a small group of rebels, very small, and apparently the U.S. has struggled to even recruit fighters for the program. This has been delayed. They have far fewer students than planned. This seems like a mess right from the beginning.
Well, what's interesting is there was no mention at all of al-Qaeda in that statement or what al-Qaeda is actually doing inside Syria. And the previous iteration of this effort last year there was an attempt to train up these so-called moderate rebels in northern Syria. And what al-Qaeda did was it quickly overran them and took their weapons. In fact, took their anti-tank missiles, which U.S. taxpayers paid for, and then used them against the Assad regime to capture the city of Idlib earlier this year. So this is a situation where if you're not thinking strategically, if you're just trying to basically move in an ad hoc fashion, which the administration is, it's just ripe with problems.
Thomas, I spoke with Senator John McCain recently. He says that the United States lacks a real plan in Syria and that essentially allows ISIS to have free reign in the region. Here's what he said.
But overall, there's still no strategy concerning Syria whatsoever. They continue to be able to launch attacks even inside Baghdad. So you certainly could argue that ISIS is still enjoying significant success.
Thomas, any way you look at it, is this a strategy that has any real chance of success?
No, I think what we're looking at right now are sort of, as I said, ad hoc efforts. I think a lot of America's counterterrorism posture is sort of focused on taking out key leaders, key individuals here and there. And that's helpful, and that's an effective tactic. But if you look at the broader picture, whether it be ISIS or al-Qaeda, there's really no strategy for combating the growth of their insurgencies across several nations at a time. And that's really what's troubling here. What Senator McCain said about Iraq is right. There have not been any, they lost to Crete earlier this year, ISIS did, but they've still got a hold of a significant chunk of Iraq. They really have not lost their supposed caliphate whatsoever. And they're still able to launch attacks throughout the country. And in fact, we've seen in Western Iraq, they've actually been on the offensive of late. So all this speaks to the fact that there's really no strategy in place for rolling this whole thing back.
I got about a minute left here. Turkey and Saudi Arabia, they have agreed to assist the rebels in Syria to overthrow Assad. But is it fair to say that without American assistance, one way or another, that will fail?
Be very careful with what was announced with the the announcement from Turkey and Saudi Arabia. This is something we've been warning about for a long time. Al-Qaeda is deeply embedded in the coalition that Saudi Arabia and Turkey are supporting. It's called Jaish al-Fatah, Army of Conquest. Al-Qaeda has been leading the charge behind that coalition, and Turkey and Saudi Arabia are offering a variety of arguments for why they should support them, but none of their arguments are valid.
Is this what has been announced here in some ways an appeasement, just to sort of bridge a gap and make it seem to the American public as if this administration is doing something? I got about 30 seconds left.
Well, the U.S. didn't get involved early on, didn't support the true moderates who were trying to overthrow the Assad regime and build up the rebel forces there. That was a huge, colossal mistake, as we argued at the time. What's happened is that over time, the extremists, including particularly Al Qaeda and its allies in Syria, have gotten stronger and stronger. And right now, they are the instrumental part of the rebellion against Assad, further complicating any effort to really impact U.S. policy here.
This won't throw a scare into anybody, will it?
No, I have to always look 18 months, 24 months down the line. And we were warning about where we are right now 2 years ago, and now I'm warning that things are only going to get worse 2 years from now. So,
and I think 2 years ago you were right, and so many other people were right as well. And again, it's an administration that has simply failed to see the future for whatever reason. Thomas Joscelyn, pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
oh, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Let's also remind everybody that this group will get air cover and possible medevacs and planes, but they still haven't said exactly what this group's going to get. Come on, guys. The Hard Line, the fastest 60 minutes in news continues.